As we continue to look back on President Trump's first 100 days of his second administration, we have unquestionably seen how he has been able to dismantle the previous administration's DEI crusade across the federal government. But what President Trump has done on this issue of DEI reaches beyond just the federal government. It's also had a major impact on the private sector. How? Well, let's discuss that. Joining me now is Will Hild. He's the Executive Director of Consumers Research, which is the nation's oldest consumer protection organization. And with Will at the helm, Consumers Research has been a leader in the fight against ESG and woke capitalism. So I don't know of anyone who knows more about the topic than Will. Welcome back to Washington Watch. Great to have you, Will.
Great to be with you again.
All right, so let's just begin just kind of 30,000-foot view, your assessment of the second Trump administration on day 100 in terms, let's just go ahead and be specific when it comes to DEI. How's he done?
I couldn't have asked for more. It's been such an incredible whirlwind of pushback and executive orders on the entire DEI grift complex. Really nothing more we could ask for. I mean, especially just this last week when they got rid of the disparate impact EO from the LBJ administration, which was basically an excuse to discriminate against normal people without any proof that any kind of discrimination had actually happened, because all you needed was the fact that a rule or a policy affected one group more than another. So I think it's been fantastic, and we've seen what this is doing to the federal government. But I'm hopeful over the next 100 days, we're going to start to see this trickle through to the for-profit sector, the corporate sector, because a lot of this was actually driven by government, either threats of suit against companies that didn't have a DEI department or weren't engaging in DEI, or government contracts that required DEI to be going on at the company in order to get federal funds.
Yeah, that is what's so impressive to me. His work in this first 100 days, specifically on this issue, is far beyond impacting just the federal government. I mean, we just had the New York City Pride Parade just lose a ton of major sponsors, people like MasterCard, Citi, and PepsiCo, all sorts of companies pulling out from Pride Month and all this kind of stuff, the parade there. Tell us about that. Why are these companies pulling out?
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons going on there. First of all, I think that they are increasingly seeing consumer fatigue with the constant shoving of the LGBTQ agenda down people's throats through the corporate sector. They don't get as much credit as they used to get from the left for doing it anyway, and they're getting an increasing amount of heat for doing it from people who just won't want these corporations to engage in politics at all. They find it nauseating. So I think that's part of it. In addition, it's going to take a long time. It's sort of like if you dump a bunch of, if you were to take out a bunch of poison from a pond, it takes a little while for things to return back to the way that they used to be. I think we're going to find out that a lot of this corporate activity, as I alluded to before, was actually being driven by government action, either direct subsidization through programs that required it or encouraged it, or enforcement of Civil Rights Act type statutes that went after corporations if they weren't being seen as properly deferential to these advocacy groups. So I think what you're seeing, from all what I've seen, there actually is huge layoffs going on at Human Rights Council, one of the big activist groups that were pushing this agenda. It suggests that donations are down. They've lost a lot of momentum. So I'm hopeful that this is a combination of consumer fatigue from what we've seen. We've seen a lot of that with the work that we've done, but also an ending to the subsidization and enforcement against companies that don't do it.
So it's both. I think you're spot on with that. The people are fatigued with all this stuff being crammed down their throats, but unquestionably the role that the Trump administration has had pushing back against all these things has likewise had an impact. I think that's a good insight. Is there anything else you think that the Trump administration can do to discourage, not just from the federal government, but discourage these big companies from continuing to push the woke ideologies on consumers?
Absolutely. And the big thing, we've actually pointed them in some directions for this, but the big thing is that executive order, a lot of people didn't even know about, that Trump put out requesting that each agency that has civil rights enforcement action, so that's almost all of them, because almost all of them have some sort of civil rights department, look for 9 corporations or organizations that are currently discriminating against whites or Christians, and go after them for that. Because as we all know, it has become basically commonplace for Christians to be discriminated against in the workplace. I mean, getting involved in Pride Month itself, in my estimation, is a hostile workplace environment infraction for a corporation. Imagine if we were, if MasterCard said that they were going to force every employee to go to trainings or celebrate Easter for an entire month. Imagine the lawsuits that would come out of that. And yet that's what they've been doing every June. So that EO from Trump pointing the agencies to look into, pick 9 organizations or companies and look into that. I'm really looking for follow through on that. I think that's going to be huge. If corporations really start to feel the heat from that, if people like Harmeet Dillon, who now runs the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, if the inspector generals in the civil rights divisions of even the Department of Education, which has been mainly shut down, but still does have by statute a Department of Civil Rights, if they start going after schools and corporations and medical facilities for this kind of discrimination and DEI behavior, then I think you'll really start to see it's already in retreat, but it's sort of a war of attrition. They're just sort of slowly laying people off. I think you start seeing the lawsuits flying. This stuff will be disavowed. They will be coming to the government saying, how do we just settle? We engaged in this for a decade, but we know it's illegal. How do we get ourselves out of this? So that's really the next step that I'm looking for. And some of the targets that we've gone after, I think, make great candidates. For example, we've gone after the Cleveland Clinic for a rank discrimination against not only their own employees, but also patients. They had set up programs that were only open to people of a certain skin color. And of course, they've been engaging in child sex changes, which is grotesque and almost you struggle for words to describe that in horrible enough ways. If they were to face legal consequences from the Trump administration, I think that would go a long way to cleaning up our entire society.
Wow. All right. So that's encouraging. What about on the consumer side? So you've got the pressure that you're saying that the Trump administration can still apply. Is there anything that consumers can do to send a message to these major retailers to back off all these pride celebrations and DEI initiatives and quit pushing all that stuff down our throats?
Absolutely, and I'm so glad you asked that question, because I think conservatives tend to only think of their power being in terms of their wallet. In other words, if they don't like a company, organization, what they're doing, they'll just won't shop there. I won't spend my money there more. The problem with that is twofold. One, the left is very noisy when they do that. They use their other category, which is voice, right? So they connect the fact that revenues are falling with what they're upset about. If you don't tell a company why it is you stop shopping there, they spend millions upon millions of dollars trying to figure out why people shop at Target or Walmart or go to a different place. It's hard. It's not an easy thing to do, and you have to do all kinds of polling. It's a lot easier when you send an email or call somebody and say, I don't appreciate this thing. We saw this with Target. We saw this with Budweiser. It went viral on social media. Say something both to the company and say something on social media, because they track that kind of thing, right? So I would say, 2 categories. Use both your wallet and use your voice. Make sure to use that voice. Conservatives haven't been doing that. If people would like to get involved with us to help with that, we have something on our website at consumersresearch.org. That's consumersresearch.org. It's called Woke Alerts. We won't bombard you, but it's a once-a-week text message-based system. We will text you the woke company of the week, but we won't just get you rattled and angry about all the bad things that are happening. We always have a call to action. We always have a way to contact the company either by phone or email or on social media and tell them why it is you're upset about them. And we've seen huge results with that. Whole DEI departments have fallen because we've put out woke alerts on this, and both we have about, I think, over 100,000 subscribers to this. Doesn't cost a dime. We won't hit you up for money, once a week, everything. So this isn't about us making money. This is about activating a base of people to communicate to these companies and push back, and it's been working.
Incredible. Woke company of the week. All right, real quick, last question, because I want to get to my next guest real quickly. But we do have woke companies out there. Ben & Jerry's, Costco, Delta. I mean, there's a host of them. JP Morgan. What would you say to those companies? What's your message to them real quickly?
Absolutely. Well, I think some of them have staked their position and made it very clear from the beginning. Ben and Jerry's probably isn't going to change. Even their own, the names of the ice cream usually have some woke connotation to a lot of them. But I think companies like JP Morgan have to be a lot more nervous because, one, they serve a much more diverse politically and socioeconomically consumer base, and they have to be worried about their perception. So pushing back on that is going to be a lot more effective. The other thing they have to worry about is banking is an incredibly regulated industry. And if people start to, speak to their representatives, both at the state and the federal level, and say, I don't like what JP Morgan is doing in terms of debanking conservatives or Christians. I don't like what they're doing in terms of the pushing harmful net zero, which is, I won't go into all that, but basically it's going to raise prices for basically everything you buy. If people start to talk to their elected representatives about that, they have to worry about that big time. And so that's another thing you can do is talk to your state and local reps or your federal reps and say, I don't like what these big banks are trying to do to control our politics. They should stick to banking, not engage in that. So think about when you're, let's say you're only going to make 3 phone calls, right? Don't call Ben and Jerry's. That would might be a recommendation. They get conservative hate. They've been getting it for, their entirety of their existence. But a company like Wells Fargo, a company like JP Morgan, a company like Bank of America, for example, which has become very woke, but still, literally has the word America. It literally wears the flag as part of its logo. Pushing back on a company like that and letting them know what they're up to and you don't like it, that's going to have way more of an effect. So I pick those neutral targets or companies that try to come across as neutral.
Thank you, Will Hild, Executive Director of Consumers Research. Great information. Thank you for joining us today on Washington
Great to be on
Watch.
with you. God bless.